And some people say you're betting on the horse, which is the product. Oftentimes, I feel like you're betting on the jockey and the horse race, right? Which is the market. And if you get somebody and you have a really, charismatic, hardworking, go-getter founder, that person is usually also capable of getting other things done, and you will not understand how.
Hello, I'm Daniel Weinmann, and this is Beyond Technical, the Non-Technical Founders podcast. You see, in order to bring my startups to life, I had to go from non-technical to CTO. I failed again and again and again until I finally succeeded a few times. Now I think it's time to share some of these experiences with you, together with a bunch of amazing guests I met along the way. In today's episode, we have David Wadler, a startup founder and angel investor. He created Twistage, which was like YouTube even before YouTube was a thing. Later on, he came to found Vendorful, a company that provides a SaaS product for e-sourcing and vendor management. We hope you have a great time listening. Let's go beyond technical. David, welcome to Beyond Technical. We're pleased to have you. The thing that I like the most about your story and your background is the variety of things you did on your life, including being a personal trainer, a founder, and a bunch of other stuff. So why don't we start by you telling us about what were the professions you had in your life?
Oh boy, it's interesting. I just last weekend I went with my family to this fair around mineralogy. So all different sorts of rocks and minerals. And there was one booth at this fair that had nothing to do with that. And it was cutlery, knives.
Mm-hmm.
And I had worked for that company when I was 19, selling knives. And it was a formative experience for me. It's really when I learned that, I could sell. So, from that time on, I've done a lot of different stuff. I've been, paid to write. I've had a literary agent. Obviously, did not continue to pursue that. I've had some terrible jobs. I worked at this magazine company where, I was fetching coffee for people and picking up their dry cleaning. I was 29 when I was doing that. So I was like moving backwards professionally. I worked as a software engineer. I worked as a product manager. I worked as a recruiter, a headhunter. I worked as a personal trainer, although you can't tell now, but that's what 2 kids will do to you. And 2 kids in COVID. So I've done just a ton of different stuff. One of the things I like about having my own startup is I get to continue to do a ton of different stuff. There are some people who are blessed with having a very narrow set of interests. I'm not blessed that way. I get bored. So I like being able to do this, then this, then this, and then that, and constantly move around. And doing a startup, you don't have a choice but to do that.
Yeah, like multiple hats that you need to wear. I love this, man. I myself feel very identified with your journey because I've done a bunch of things in my career. In software engineering was one of the things I did a lot, but almost like always trying to do different things and coming back to it more than being blessed, just like I said, by having one thing I love to do. I love to do multiple things. And currently, you're the founder of your second startup, right?
Yes. Yep.
Vendorful.
It's called Vendorful. Yep.
Yeah. And you provide software as a service for people who work with procurement. Like
primarily
RFP,
procurement.
This kind of thing.
Yep. So RFP, supply management, supply performance, so all that kind of stuff. But yeah, generally we're selling to the procurement persona, as they say in sales.
This is your second venture. The first one was Twistage, right?
Yes.
And it was an online video platform.
Yes, you've done your homework.
The team did the homework, and I read it.
We should tell everybody there was no pre-interview. This was all orchestrated over email. You didn't even ask me, I didn't get a questionnaire. Sometimes I get asked to do these podcasts. I get, asked to fill out nothing. So this is all fresh. I'm impressed so far.
Awesome, man. Awesome. And what led you to starting first Twistage? What was the spark?
Sure. So, I mentioned that I was, getting dry cleaning and getting coffee for people. There's nothing wrong with that, but I was not making progress in my career. It wasn't a linear path for me, and I don't think it's a linear path for everybody. I think the idea that you graduate from college and then you kind of work up a corporate ladder, that's fine for some people, but not everybody. And I just I was just doing because I didn't know what else to do, and also because I didn't have an idea. I developed an idea, and the pull of the idea combined with the push, the utter dissatisfaction I had professionally, I said, let me go ahead and do this. Now, I had worked at some other companies where they maybe treated me better or whatever, but I saw decisions being made that I didn't agree with, and a couple of the companies I worked for went out of business, and I really like the idea of being accountable to myself if I fail. And the beauty of that is when you can own that responsibility, you have agency to fix it.
Yeah.
And, if you're somebody else's business and they're making terrible choices, you can say, oh, no, let's not do that. And then the company implodes, like you can't do anything. So I wanted to stop it before it imploded. Fortunately, it didn't implode. I made tons of mistakes. I did a lot of things really stupidly, but ultimately it ended up being a good outcome for everybody.
That's awesome. Yeah, in my experience with entrepreneurs, the need to control your own destiny, or at least influence it more heavily, is very important, right?
I'll tell you, there's one other thing that I think is very important. You will spend more time, at your job than you will with your family. Yeah. Now, maybe that's less true today, post-COVID, and the work from home model. I think it's in some respects it's going to be here to stay. Certainly for some businesses and industries. But back then, I was going to an office every day, and I'd spend a lot of time there. And while I was doing that startup, I got married and I had 2 children. If I'm going to choose to spend that much time away from my family, I really want to like the people I work with. And so when it's your business, you choose the people with whom you work. Yeah. And that is also, you create your culture, you create your environment. And so that also, I think, is very important for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, that's an amazing way to give more meaning to your life and more satisfaction without, compromising on your ambitions. Like you can achieve your ambitions with people you like. So this is amazing.
I think frankly, you're more likely to. We have somebody on our team who told me one of the best things I've ever heard. He goes, everybody here is my favorite person to work with. And I was like, that is just such a nice thing to hear. But you want to do well, not just for yourself, but for them. And they want to do well, for you. And that's, I think, when everybody is rowing in the same direction for that reason, because they're really internally motivated, emotionally, right, to support their colleagues, it's you're more likely to end up successful. This is not easy. Starting a business is horrible. I wouldn't wish this on anybody. If you're listening to this and you are happy to like a regular job, do that, right? Because I wake up every day and I've already been successful, and I don't I don't have to worry about how am I going to pay for my kids to go to college. Like I'm okay, and I still wake up every day thinking like, oh God, I feel like I want to throw up from the anxiety. So when you are working with people you really enjoy, that makes a lot of this much easier.
Yeah. Just tonight, I woke up at 2:30 in the morning. I don't know why, but I woke up and the thoughts around what needed to be done on my business prevented me from falling back to sleep until like 5:30. So it is kind of
it is some sort of insanity to do this. And I have friends who've been in this startup mode longer than I have. And all of us, it seems like we try to leave it and then we come back. After my last company was acquired, I told my wife, I'm like, this is great. I have all these resources. I have so much support. I make a lot of money. I have a ton of autonomy. And she's like, oh, I give you 6 months. After 6 months, like, oh my God, everything's so slow here. We can't make a decision to save our lives. Why are we doing this and not that? And so, I'm just not wired to be anything other than like full of anxiety, I think.
Yeah. And in being an entrepreneur is usually less of a decision than something you make peace with over time.
Yeah, that's probably right. There should be a special therapist for entrepreneurs who tells them that, like, look, it is what it is. You can't fight it. Just come to accept it.
Yeah. And so you ended up selling Twistage, and how many years between deciding you're going to start the first day you worked on it and the time you sold it?
It's hard to quantify. It's because I think it was more toe in the water. Like, I didn't commit to working on it. I mean, I think that from the time we started playing around with the idea to even incorporating it as a business, it was probably like 12 to 18 months. So it's probably, depending on how you want to measure it, it's probably 7 to 9 years, right? So but split the middle and call it 8 years. And early on, and for those of you who have internet access, you can go to archive.org, the Internet Archive, and look up Vlogville, VLOGVILLE.com. And that was a lot like YouTube, but we hadn't heard of YouTube. I don't know that YouTube existed when we started that. I'd have to actually look at their Internet Archive, but there was a lot of small things going on with online video at the time. And I know we were way out ahead of them when we finally found out about them in terms of like features and functionality. A guy called me. He's now a very prominent VC on the West Coast. He said, hey, have you seen the site YouTube? So I typed the letter U, the word tube. I'm like, there's nothing. He's like, no, YOU. So I looked and I was like, oh no, this site is just laden with pirated content. We have all this anti-piracy stuff. These guys are going to get in such trouble. Well, a video called Lazy Sunday, which was a Saturday Night Live skit, ended up going viral on YouTube. It could never have gone viral on our platform because it would have been taken down automatically by our system. But in social media, virality wins. We got in our own way, right? Example of a mistake I made. Like, we're not going to get sued, and basically, within 2 months after that, we said, guess what? We're a B2B company. So we took all the technology that we built and started being YouTube for businesses. So it was it was a good time.
Yeah, it sounds like it, like on the frontier of video over the internet. So it's an amazing experience, definitely.
Yeah, I was like writing our transcoder. I wrote a Windows Media transcoder, and things were happening so quickly that by the time we were ready to put it into deployment, because we were also going to figure out how to run it, either run it on Linux using something like Wine, which was not working, or we were going to have to get, and this is before EC2. We were actually EC2 beta customers, AWS beta customers. There were no documentation. We wrote all of our own stuff for provisioning and everything else with their APIs. By the time I basically had that ready to go, we had already made the decision that we were not going to use Windows Media. We were going to use Flash. So I had to do a different transcoder instead. But it was there's a lot going on. Prices were crazy. I remember we had a customer who wanted us to move to their content delivery network. They were charging $1 per gigabyte of data moved. I think that price today is probably, around a penny, 2 pennies. It's 100x, 50 to 100x decline. So it was very early, and going first is not always the best move. Not that you want to let somebody else carve the way, and you can go into their groove and save a lot of time.
But it was you were acquired. Was it great acquisition? Were you thrilled after selling the company? And what was the motivation for selling and the story behind it?
So the motivation for selling was we we were a bit dysfunctional, sort of in terms of our board composition, and the company was actually wildly profitable, and we didn't think that made sense. We wanted to invest heavily in growth, but it took 2.5 years for us to raise $1. We had some wonderful investors, and we had some less wonderful investors. But the less wonderful investors who were able to kind of authorize, I did not agree to the world's best term sheet. And I went in eyes open. Our attorney said, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being 100% favorable for the investor, 1 being 100% favorable for the company, said, this is a 9. I think we can get it to a 7.
Got it.
We're not going to get it to a 5. And it had been 2.5 years. I said, we have to move forward and give up. So we'll take the money and whatever comes with it. So, there was discussion about like paying a dividend, et cetera. And I was like, we're in such a good position right now. We don't even need, outside investment because we're printing money here and operating at 89.5% gross margin. Like, let's go. And we couldn't find anything that made everybody happy. So, we thought a sale would make the most sense. In terms of the sale, it was exhausting. We did the whole diligence in 30 days. It was with a public company. I couldn't talk at the end. Like, I was just a mess. And one of my partners called me up, and he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm at the office. I'm still signing papers. I'm still going through documentation. He goes, have you logged into your bank account? I said, no, I'll do it later. He goes, log in. And he said, do you see it? Is it in there? I'm like, it's in there. And he's like, isn't that amazing? I said, I can't even process this right now. Like, I'm so tired. I did print it up and I gave it to my wife when I got home. And I said, I'll think about this later. It took me probably like 2 weeks for the hangover to go by for me to realize, oh my God. But yeah, this other guy, he was at the bank trying to take out an ungodly amount of cash to go next door and buy a watch, a very expensive watch in cash. But they would not let him take out more than $1,000. So he called me up and said, I can't do that. Probably for the best.
Yeah, and in a sense, I feel from your answer that you personally didn't want to sell. But in a sense, you being this very versatile person, you probably ended up after the sale being able to do more cool things. Is that too far off for your trajectory?
I didn't like that. I felt like I didn't have a choice whether or not, like, selling. It became clear that selling was the only thing everybody was okay with, right? Because the other choices, like, one was grow and one was stay at this size, basically, and then pay out a dividend. And I wasn't interested in building a lifestyle business. Like, lifestyle businesses are great. I think they have a terrible, reputation with, everyone. They're not necessarily great as an investor, but if that's what you want, like, and you can do it, that's great. But I wasn't making an awesome salary because that wasn't dictated by me. I could have made a great salary and we still would have been profitable, but I still wouldn't have wanted to do it because I wanted to build something that was going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. I'm friends with the guys at Wistia, and they originally, like, so I had 2 business partners. Like, one of them went to college with me, so we both went to Brown. Our application was built in Ruby on Rails, and it was an online video startup. The founders of Wistia both went to Brown. It's a Ruby on Rails application, and it's online video. So they heard me on a podcast and emailed me, and I took one of them out to dinner. My wife's like, what are you, crazy? You're taking out a competitor. I'm like, oh, we can all be friends. It's fine. Those guys, they've really, they've had the chance to build this amazing business. They bought out their outside investors. They have 100 some odd people. They love going to work every day. And I just wanted different things than our investors did. And like, our team wanted different things than our investors did. So so we ended up there. The big win, 2 big wins for me in terms of how that played out. One, overnight, I went from some idiot doing a startup to, this esteemed successful entrepreneur with an exit. So the perception, like the world's perception of me had changed. I didn't know anything more the day after the sale was announced than the day before, but people just perceived me differently, and not in a bad way. And the other thing is, I had an extremely difficult time raising money. As I mentioned, it took me 2.5 years to raise $1. My parents didn't want to invest until somebody else invested. And, I've been able to invest in a bunch of startups and really, support the entrepreneurs. And some of these have gone, quite well for me financially as well. And so had I held on, to the business, for 4 or 5 years longer, I might have missed these opportunities to put money into, seed investments.
Yeah. And that's actually a great segue, because you, apart from being the founder of Vendorful, you're an angel investor with multiple investments, right? Mm-hmm. What made you want to invest? Is like the financial incentive, the being close to other entrepreneurs. What was the trigger there?
All of it. So I actually just got off the immediate Zoom I was on right before this one was with a company where I'm an investor. And it's the only one where I said, I really don't care about the money. I care about the mission. And I think they're doing a lot of social good. And I told her maybe 2 years ago, if you decide to turn this whole thing into a not-for-profit, I am 100% okay with that, right? You don't have to worry about my money. It just turns into a charitable donation. That's fine. I'm good. You have to do what you want to do, and you have to, all the other investors, but you won't hear anything from me. The other thing is, there is, I get joy out of like the whole creative process, and to be part of it, even if it's a bit more at arm's length. With most of these investments, I have some involvement. That might mean that they want to talk to me and bounce ideas off me. It might mean they want introductions. It might mean that, I get on the call with a potential investor in some cases and try to help them pitch the business to expand the number of investors. But I get to vicariously experience, some additional stuff. Now, not everything is a rocket ship, but, a few of them have been, which has been great. And then lastly, probably more than half the investments are other entrepreneurs who I got to know when I was doing Twistage. And we kind of came up together at the same time. Yeah. And I put money into theirs, they put money into mine, and we support each other and we help each other out. And it's nice to see your investment succeed. It's even nicer when you're friends with the person who is succeeding. And, the relationships we've had, people say, keep your money and your relationships separate. If you're the right kind of relationship, you don't need to. And some of them have been great, and some of them, I'm never going to see my money back, and I'm okay with that, because I've what I care about is high integrity, hard work, everything else. A lot of this, the outcomes are tied to luck and circumstance.
And what do you look for when you're deciding to invest in a company?
I look for an unfair advantage. So an unfair advantage to me means that I have some information that is not going to be available to most other people. Mm-hmm. An unfair advantage could mean that I have a relationship with the person for 10 years, and I know who this person is, and I know how they operate and everything else. I have a friend who has a unicorn, and VCs have reached out to me to try to, how can I get connected to him, etc. But I have that unfair advantage. I knew before they knew that he was super capable. An unfair advantage could be that I have domain expertise. An unfair advantage could mean that I have a lot of relationships where I can make introductions and be a force multiplier for that business. That's generally what it is. There again, there's the one exception where when I looked at one business, I said, "Oh my God, this is so good for society." I'll do that. And then there's one other one where the CEO is just he won me over like one day at a time, but and I don't have an unfair advantage there. Maybe I did. I had a level of access that maybe some of the other people on the cap table didn't have for a while. Yeah. That's probably it. I'm and I would say it's very hard for me. Like if it's a good friend of mine and he said or she said, "Oh, I'm building a social network for cat photos," I might invest because I know that friend is a really good entrepreneur. But if I get somebody like random contacting me, I get a lot of people contacting me about. I got somebody contacting me recently at NFTs. Yes. I don't have any experience in NFTs, so while it's maybe conceptually interesting, I don't even know what questions to ask to evaluate whether it's an investable opportunity. And so if I have zero domain experience, zero knowledge of the entrepreneur, I have no idea how it benefits society, like it's probably not investable for me.
Perfect. As you know, this podcast has the intention of contributing to the journey of non-technical founders of startups. What do non-technical founders need to have for you to be interested in investing in their startups?
Probably a technical partner. So, I am a technical founder, where it's probably more accurate to say I was a technical founder. So when I did Twistage, I was involved in writing code. Of the three of us, I was the worst developer, but I was a productive developer. With Vendorful, my partner and I made a decision very early on that I would not write code. That it would ultimately be a drag on my productivity elsewhere. If you're building a non-technical business, I don't care if you're technical. If you're building a business, I had somebody reach out to me a few months ago, and she was great, super dynamic, had an idea that she liked. I was a little less bullish on the idea, but I really liked her. And she was, trying to raise money. And I said, okay, so what do you have to show me? She's like, I put together these wireframes. And I said, okay, what about, do you have got anything working? She's like, no. And I said, okay, what are you going to do with the money? She's like, I'm going to hire some, technical firm to go out and build this for me. I said, oh, are you hiring employees? Said, no, I can't afford them. I'm going to outsource it. And I said, well, if you're going to outsource it, like the odds that it gets finished on time and on budget, that's probably a coin flip. I said, and then if you get funded, you're probably going to have to throw it all away and start again, because you're going to hire at that point, you'll have money to hire a technical person. That person will say, I don't like the way this thing was built. Yeah, more likely than not. So I said, I don't know in your particular business if you are investable unless you have a technical co-founder.
What I really like to explore, I want to press on a few things. What if she had sales? She managed to sell something to someone and did like a concierge MVP or something like that.
Yep.
Would that change your perspective?
Yeah, it probably would. It says something to me about that founder. If that founder is able to sell basically vaporware. I have sold vaporware, and then had to deliver on the vaporware, in the past. I've done it. I'm sure I will do it again. But if you're able to do that, you're going to have to end up building something anyway. Yeah. And if you haven't planned, so that's the thing. If she said, I don't have a technical co-founder, I got somebody to buy this idea. They signed a contract. I had 6 months to build it. I have an MVP. I built that with this outsourcer. Now what I want to do, because I validated this, I want to throw it away and build the whole thing myself. That to me is a more backable story than the one I got, which is I haven't convinced anybody to pay me for this. I'm going to spend a bunch of money to have some people build the thing that I think that I can sell. And then, she sells it, it probably gets thrown away. And maybe that's not the worst thing in the world, but if she can't sell it, she probably raised money too soon. The other thing I can say is, again, it depends on what it is you're doing, but much of many good businesses are not like novel computer science.
Yes.
There are lots and lots of CRMs. Many of these CRM systems that get sold, basically the sales pitch is Salesforce is way too complicated. We can give you a much simpler CRM, and it's basically a relational database on the back end and a pretty clean UI.
Yeah.
And many non-technical people, if they were just to start going through some tutorials, in Ruby on Rails or PHP or Django or whatever, could probably build a demoable product. They just commit themselves to it for a year.
Yeah, that was my story. I had worked with development in my mid-teens, and then when the web came, I didn't do much, didn't know how web development worked. But one day I wanted to start a crowdfunding platform like Kickstarter here in Brazil, and I couldn't find a technical founder, and I learned how to do it in Ruby on Rails.
Yep.
What I've been impressed by over the years is that there are many people who just won't take this path, and still they make things happen. And this is very interesting to me. Like for example, they can create a structure where they sell vaporware or they sell service that will eventually be scaled through technology, for example. And after I started talking to investors who really wanted to invest in great entrepreneurs, what I discovered is that most of them would invest in good businesses, good entrepreneurs that will figure out tech later, as long as they are doing real businesses.
Yep. So you're betting on the jockey, right? And just the entrepreneur. And some people say you're betting on the horse, which is the product. Oftentimes, I feel like you're betting on the jockey and the horse race, right? Which is the market.
Yes.
And if you get somebody and you have a really, charismatic, hardworking, go-getter founder, that person can sell vaporware. That person is usually also capable of getting other things done, and you will not understand how.
Exactly.
So I have no technical team, blah, blah, but I had this friend who has a friend, and I had her build me just like over the course of the weekend thing. I just took her out to dinner, and now I had this prototype, and I used that prototype, and I put it in front of this company, and they said, oh, if it had these 3 features. So I had another friend, I hadn't bothered him. So he built those 3 features. Then they started paying me money. Now, this thing that I have, it runs off the computer in my living room. So I'm going to have to throw it away, and I know it. But I'm making, $1,000 a month with this first customer. Like, there's something very impressive about somebody who can do that.
Yeah.
Right. And so then that's when you say you're betting on the jockey. And if you like the market, you're betting on the horse race. The horse, the product, fungible. In that case.
Yeah, the horse, of course, the horse is important, even in the metaphor, right? You need the horse, but it's when you have a great jockey and a great race, you can bet.
But the horse is, when I say it's fungible, right? If you have that jockey and the horse gets injured, you get another horse.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard. And I don't want to extend the metaphor too far, but in the metaphor, it's much. If you're running the wrong race, right, you're in the wrong market. That's a problem, and that will, typically require more than a product pivot. A market pivot can be much harder to pull off. And if you have the wrong entrepreneur, even if they're in a great market and they have a good product, that's also going to be tough. The product, frankly, is probably the easiest thing to change, and that's why when we talk about pivots. That's really what we're talking about. We're talking about people are redoing the product. If you are going to change the market, you almost necessarily have to change your product. But many of the pivots, leverage the domain expertise that the entrepreneur has developed in a specific market. They say, we thought that the enterprise was really the interesting part of the market. It's actually the SMB. Mm-hmm. Our product was built for the enterprise. We're going to have to redo it for the SMB. So the race is the same, right? They're still in the same market, still the same person. Change the horse.
Yeah, and what you described, the hypothetical founder you described is what we like to call like an unstoppable founder. Doesn't matter if they're technical, they're non-technical, they're resilient and resourceful enough to make things happen.
Yep. One of the nicest things, one of our investors in the last business, a guy named Jerry Colonna, and Jerry is now an executive coach, but he was a VC at now Flatiron Partners in New York in the 90s, which Flatiron was the highest returning venture fund. And he told me, David, you succeeded in this business through sheer force of will.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's very nice to hear. It also explains why I'm so tired.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I got laughed at in meetings. I literally had a VC fall asleep when I was pitching. It wasn't easy. But I was not going to fail.
And the second time around, is it easier than the first one?
Easier and harder. So easier to raise money, easier to recruit people. Like half the company used to work for me before. They're like, oh, I like you. I'll come back. Easier to get meetings, higher level of credibility. But harder in that I think my expectations have changed.
Yes.
I like the first outcome was life-changing for me, but I want to do it bigger and better than that one. In English we say the goalposts have moved.
Yeah.
Perfect. The target is further away and smaller, right? It's just harder to get to what I want to get to. And that's a challenge. It's weird. We're definitely ahead of the pace I was at Twistage, but here, I feel like, it's not fast enough. And at Twistage, we were not doing nearly as well as we are here. And I would think like things are okay. Like we went the first 3 years and it's zero happening, and we kept moving our own goalposts. We get to the end of the year and we haven't figured this out. We're going to quit. We get to the end of the year, we say, oh my God, we learned so much. We were so stupid thinking that this would be the time to quit. Now we know what we're doing. Let's give it another year. We give it another year. We'd say, okay, we thought we knew what we were doing at the end of last year, but we learned even more this year. And then, we kept doing that. It's risky because, you could do that for 10 years and never make any progress. There it worked out. Here, you save a lot of time by knowing what's not important. And things that your first startup feel important, and you later find out what was and wasn't. That's definitely nice.
You mentioned the pleasure of being able to work with people you like when you build a team. How much of your time do you invest in building culture, team engagement, and all around team building?
Probably surprisingly little. And the reason is we've been distributed from day one. And most of the people here already knew each other. And so I sort of lucked into having a culture from the beginning. And we've since added people who I didn't know. But just sort of through osmosis, they kind of adopt the right approaches. I really like everybody personally. When we do get together in person, we go out to eat or whatever. It's fun. I have a ton of respect for people intellectually here as just really smart people. But death by meetings is it's like less than COVID, but there's a lot of meetings that companies have. And we got acquired. I had a weekly strategy meeting, and I'm like, if we're having a weekly strategy meeting, it should be called the tactics meeting.
Yeah, perfect.
Because we can't be redoing the strategy every week. And the meetings were you had a meeting for the sake of having a meeting. Oh, we're not in the same office. We should get on a call, or now get on a Zoom. So we don't do a lot of that. We actually had 0 team meetings until we got to 6 people. Then we do them once a month. But there's a lot of ad hoc kind of on-demand interaction. We're very development heavy. All the developers do pair programming with all the other developers. So there's just constant, and I'm still very involved in products. Sales is involved in products. So it happens. I think we will have to pay more attention when we're 100 people, especially if we stay scattered around the globe.
Yeah.
It gets harder to do.
When you talk about meetings, I remember you mentioned working with Ruby on Rails in the early days, and the guys from 37 Signals, now Basecamp, have been talking about this for a long time. Were they an influence for your, let's say, upbringing in terms of?
No, it was weird. I mean, we sort of like calculus, was invented in two places at roughly the same time by two different people with no knowledge of each other.
Yeah.
And this isn't unique to us. I think that a lot of people, as they moved into web development and tooling became available for this, sort of naturally fell into, well, this kind of feels like the right way to do things. So after our company was acquired, we got sent to Agile training. Now, we did not have scrums. We did not have stand-ups. We did not read books about it. We developed our own sort of framework and methodology to do stuff. So we go to the Agile training, and the guy's like, oh, this is how you do this. I'm like, oh, interesting. We do, A, B, C, D, just like you do, but our E and F are different. And we explained why and everything else. He's like, where do you guys read about this and come up with it? Like, it just sort of evolved organically. We didn't discuss it or think about it, just sort of happened. And I think, I'd spent enough time in corporate America to know what I did not like and to push back against those things. And again, I think probably we were ill-served by not having a monthly meeting until we got to 5 people. And that's maybe a reaction like post-acquisition, having so many meetings. But it sort of evolved organically.
One last question. A non-technical founder has just decided to start a startup. What would be the first step in your mind? Like, I want to start something, and they have the idea.
Sure. Stop doing that and get a regular job. But if assuming they're committed to it, and they've come to accept it, they've come to grips with the fact that this is what they're going to do. The first step, I think, would be to go out and try to validate the idea, and also to be very mindful when you're out there validating the idea. I pitched the idea for Vendorful. The first iteration of Vendorful was a free product, and I pitched that to a lot of people, and I was told by all the people, "Oh, what a great idea! This is so cool." I found out that the word "free" was the F word in procurement. Right? It was like very off-putting to people. And that meant that we had to change the business model, wanted to change the business model, had to, change the product. And there's our pivot, right? We stayed in the same market. So all the knowledge we had acquired, was still useful, which is great. But, going out and getting validation, I think, is important. And also understanding that validation is different when you're not asking people to use your product or open their wallet or anything else. So I would say that if you have a commercial product, go out and try to sell it. See if somebody will pay you anything for it. Even if it's a commercial letter of intent. If you build this thing for me and it has these features, I will pay for it. And I'm not super concerned about the amount. It's sort of like, if you said it's $1, maybe. But if you're selling into an enterprise and it's, you think in the future you're going to make $50,000 a year in the subscription, and in year one you're going to make $5,000 because you're not going to have this. That's great. Getting somebody to spend $5,000 on a product, you might have something. See if you can get 2 people, 3 people to do it, and then if you can do that, then you're probably on something. The worst thing, the saddest thing, is to talk to entrepreneurs, and I talk to a lot of them. I had a guy reach out to me, and he's like, I have this, this product I built. He got other developers to do it. He has some of the behaviors of the unstoppable entrepreneur that you described, but to his detriment, because if you're solving a problem that nobody else has, you can be really good at raising money. You could be really good at recruiting people to work. But you'll never be really good at making money because nobody needs your product. So he described a problem, and he characterized this as one of the biggest problems in the world. And I said, I don't have that problem, and I don't know anybody else who has that problem. And he said, oh, this is the thing that eats at me and keeps me up at night. And he'd been working on this thing for like 2 years or 3 years, and it was an app. And he had like 600 users. His daily active users was like 3 or 4. And I told him, like, if it were me, I would probably stop and do something else. He had broken up with his girlfriend. He'd let go of his apartment. He was sleeping on couches, and he was in his early 40s. And it just seemed painful. So he said, I'm convinced, like, I'm going to show you. I said, all right, let's pick a number. Do you think you can get to 10,000 users by the end of the year? So I can. I said, great. I'm not going to ask you to get to 10,000. I'm going to ask you to get to 1,000. 1,000. You have 600 now. Let's get to 1,000 by the end of the year. You have 5 months to do it. And I said, if you don't get there, maybe it's time to give up. We can talk at the end of the year. Then we added like 30 or 40 users. I said, it's time. He's like, no. You're missing a feature. I said, you're not missing a feature. You're missing a market.
Yeah. The difference between unstoppable and inflexible or stubborn is a thin line. I find
it's right. And you don't know until hindsight, right?
Yep.
I mean, we're going to start so what we read about in the press, or most of the people who are on these very high volume podcasts, were successful. Oh yeah, I started a business and things were. Those are the outliers. Yep. They get a disproportionate amount of press. Like, the more typical story is like my first startup, where I spent 2.5 years killing myself to have nobody invest, nobody buy the product, keep iterating. And finally, we get a little bit of commercial traction. Some investment traction follows that. And then the snowball starts to slowly roll down the hill. And that is more typical. Now, what would have happened if I went 2 years and I said, you know what? I put 2 years into this. It's not going to work. It's just, I give up. If I waited 6 months more, I would have had a life-changing outcome. But you don't know when you're looking forward. You can only know in retrospect. And so the scariest thing about being an entrepreneur is when you go into this, you could easily lose a decade of life chasing the wrong thing. You could also abandon ship too early before you really give it a chance to be successful. And you're never going to know.
David, thank you so much. Both your story and your way of thinking bring light to us founders. And I'm thrilled that you accepted to join us today. And it was an honor to talk to you, man.
I appreciate your having me. It's I think you do good work helping entrepreneurs accept sort of reality. I like things that are grounded, and I think this idea that entrepreneurship is sexy. Mm-hmm. I think we really need to rethink this. It's hard work. It's really deeply rewarding and satisfying, but that's because it's hard, not because it's sexy. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, man.
All right.
Bye-bye. Hey, I really, really hope this episode contributed to your journey and you were able to enjoy the conversation. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, YouTube, and your favorite podcast app. I'm Daniel Weinmann, and this was Beyond Technical, the Non-Technical Founders Podcast.